The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Thexalon of the Kruvathi Empire rose from his seat. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the light from a dozen suns streaming through the viewing ports, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled delegates. He had waited 3 rotations for this moment, and now every species in the known galaxy would witness humanity's final judgment. "The matter is settled," Thexalon announced, his voice carrying the weight of a civilization that had conquered 14 star systems. "The species calling themselves humans have been evaluated, measured, and found unworthy of continued existence. They are too dangerous, too unpredictable, and too aggressive to be allowed among civilized worlds." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Vexorian delegate nodded all 4 of its heads. The Morphean representative pulsed with approving colors. Even the peaceful Delthani, who rarely agreed to military action, remained silent in their opposition. 3 months ago," Thexalon continued, "a human vessel entered Kruvathi space without authorization. When our patrol ships requested identification, the humans opened fire without provocation. 2 of our ships were destroyed before we could respond. 47 Kruvathi warriors died that day." He paused, letting the weight of those deaths settle over the assembly. But this was not an isolated incident. The humans have a history of violence that spans their entire existence. Their homeworld has seen more wars in the last 1,000 years than most civilized species experience in 10,000. They have developed weapons of mass destruction and used them against their own kind. They consume the flesh of other living creatures. They even keep other species as property, as pets and slaves. The Morphean delegate shifted colors to deep red, a sign of disgust among their people. "We have reviewed the evidence," it said, its voice like wind through crystal caves. "The humans are descended from predators. They have forward-facing eyes designed for hunting. Their teeth are built for tearing meat. Every aspect of their biology screams danger to peaceful species." "They are also weak," added the Vexorian delegate. "Their bodies are fragile. They require specific atmospheric conditions to survive. They have no natural armor, no venom, no defensive capabilities worth mentioning. Yet they compensate for these weaknesses with aggression and cunning. This makes them more dangerous, not less." Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation gallery above the main chamber floor, watching the proceedings through the transparent barrier. She was not supposed to be here. Earth had not been granted observer status in the Galactic Council, and humanity remained unaware that other intelligent life even existed. The Council had kept Earth isolated, a quarantine world deemed too dangerous for first contact. But Sarah had found a way. 3 years ago, her deep space exploration vessel had encountered a derelict Kruvathi scout ship drifting at the edge of Sol system. The ship's data cores had contained everything: star charts, translation matrices, cultural databases, and most importantly, the location of this very station. Sarah had learned the truth that her species was not alone, and that the galaxy had already judged them and found them wanting. She had come here using stolen credentials and a modified shuttle, hoping to plead humanity's case. But she had arrived too late. The vote had already been cast. The sentence had been decided. "The Kruvathi Empire will lead a coalition fleet to eliminate the human threat," Thexalon declared. "We will arrive at their homeworld in 60 of their days. We will offer them one chance to surrender peacefully. If they refuse, we will demonstrate the consequences of threatening civilized species. The humans will be reduced to a pre-industrial state, unable to threaten anyone beyond their own planet ever again." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. 60 days. 2 months for Earth to prepare for an invasion it didn't even know was coming. 2 months to ready a defense against technologies humanity couldn't comprehend. 2 months before everything she loved would be destroyed. She watched as the council members filed out of the chamber, satisfied with their decision. They moved with the confidence of species that had never known defeat, never faced a true threat to their existence. They had centuries of peace and prosperity behind them, civilizations built on diplomatic solutions and mutual cooperation. War, to them, was a surgical tool used to correct aberrations in the galactic order. They had no idea what they had just done. Sarah made her way back to her hidden shuttle, her mind racing. She had to warn Earth. She had to give them time to prepare. But even as she thought it, she knew how impossible the situation was. How could humanity defend itself against a coalition of species with technology centuries beyond their own? How could Earth's scattered national militaries unite against a threat they couldn't even see coming? The shuttle's engines hummed to life, and Sarah punched in the coordinates for Sol system. The journey would take her 40 days, eating into the precious time Earth had left. But she had no choice. Someone had to sound the alarm, even if the alarm came too late. As her ship slipped into faster-than-light travel, Sarah pulled up every file she had stolen from the Kruvathi database. She studied their fleet compositions, their weapon systems, their battle tactics. The Kruvathi favored overwhelming force and direct confrontation. Their ships were massive dreadnoughts protected by energy shields that could withstand nuclear weapons. Their fighters moved faster than anything Earth had ever built. Their ground forces wore power armor that made them nearly invincible. The coalition fleet would number 300 ships, according to the briefing documents. 300 vessels carrying enough firepower to glass a planet's surface. And they would arrive in 60 days. Earth had 60 days to do the impossible. Back on Earth, in a nondescript office building in Geneva, General Marcus Webb reviewed satellite data with growing concern. The deep space monitoring stations had detected something unusual 3 days ago, a burst of exotic radiation from beyond the Kuiper Belt, unlike anything natural. The readings suggested advanced propulsion technology, far beyond human capabilities. Webb had been in military intelligence for 30 years. He had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him that something was coming, something Earth wasn't ready to face. He picked up his secure phone and began making calls. By the time Sarah's shuttle cleared the heliopause and entered Sol's system, Webb had already convened an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. By the time Sarah landed at a secret military base in Nevada, Webb had already begun mobilizing every asset Earth possessed. Sarah stumbled out of her shuttle after 40 days of hard travel, exhausted and running on nothing but stimulants and fear. She was immediately surrounded by armed soldiers who escorted her to a bunker deep underground. General Webb was waiting for her there, along with representatives from every major nation on Earth. "Tell us everything," Webb said simply. So she did. She told them about the Galactic Council, about the Kruvathi Empire, about the fleet that was coming and the judgment that had been passed. She showed them the data she had stolen, the technical specifications, and tactical analyses. She laid out Earth's impossible situation with brutal honesty. When she finished, the room fell silent. Some of the representatives looked terrified. Others looked angry. A few looked defeated before the fight had even begun. But Webb's expression never changed. He studied the data Sarah had provided, his eyes moving across the numbers and specifications with the practiced eye of a man who had spent his life preparing for war. 60 days, he said finally. They're giving us 60 days. It's not enough time, said the Chinese representative. Even if we pooled all our resources, we couldn't build weapons to match their technology. We couldn't train enough soldiers. We couldn't even evacuate our major cities. You're thinking about this wrong, Webb replied. He pulled up a map of Earth's military installations, defense networks, and industrial capabilities. They're giving us 60 days because they think we need time to surrender. They're giving us 60 days because they think we're weak. They're giving us 60 days because they've never fought a species like us before. He turned to face the assembled leaders, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. It wasn't fear. It wasn't desperation. It was something far more dangerous. It was hope. We've been preparing for an alien invasion since the 1950s, Webb continued. Every major military on Earth has contingency plans. We have weapons systems designed to fight enemies with superior technology. We have strategies based on asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and unconventional thinking. We have something they don't have. What's that? Asked the Russian representative. Webb smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We have 7,000 years of nearly continuous warfare. We have battle-tested strategies developed by Alexander, Sun Tzu, Napoleon, and Rommel. We have weapons built by people who understand that war is hell, and survival requires being willing to visit that hell on our enemies. We have a planet full of humans who, when pushed to the edge, fight like cornered animals because that's exactly what we are. He pulled up the technical data on Kruvathi shields and weapon systems. Captain Chen's intelligence gives us something priceless, knowledge. We know what they're bringing. We know how they think. We know their tactics. And most importantly, we know they're underestimating us. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she watched Webb work. She had come to Earth expecting panic, chaos, and despair. Instead, she had found a species that had been preparing for this moment longer than the Kruvathi Empire had existed. We have 60 days, Webb said to the assembled leaders. In 60 days, the Kruvathi will arrive at Earth expecting to find a primitive species ready to surrender. Instead, they're going to find out why humans are the apex predators of Sol System. They're going to learn what happens when you threaten a species that has survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, plagues, and nuclear weapons. He pulled up a tactical display showing Earth's orbital space, the Moon, and the inner solar system. We're going to give them their war, and we're going to teach the galaxy a lesson they'll never forget. The representatives began to argue, to question, to doubt. But Webb cut through their objections with cold precision. He laid out his plan step by step, and as Sarah listened, she began to understand something the Galactic Council had never considered. Humanity wasn't weak because they lacked advanced technology. Humanity was dangerous because they had learned to win wars without it. They had learned to turn disadvantages into advantages, to use enemy strengths against them, to find victory in situations where victory seemed impossible. The Kruvathi were bringing 300 ships to fight a planet. But Earth was bringing something far more dangerous to the fight. 7 billion humans who had just learned they were not alone in the universe, and that the universe had already decided they didn't deserve to exist. The countdown had begun. 60 days until the coalition fleet arrived. 60 days until humanity faced its first interstellar war. The Galactic Council had announced war on humanity, expecting a quick surrender or an easy conquest. They had made their first and most critical mistake. They had given humanity time to prepare, and humanity, for all its flaws and weaknesses, had never been very good at surrendering. Commander Vexcor reviewed the fleet manifest from his command throne aboard the dreadnought Infinite Justice. 300 warships stretched across space in perfect formation, each one a masterpiece of Kruvathi engineering. The coalition fleet represented the combined might of 12 species, all united in their mission to neutralize the human threat. "Status report," Vexcor commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge. "All ships report ready, Commander," his tactical officer responded. "Weapons systems are operating at peak efficiency. Shield generators are calibrated. Our fighter squadrons are prepared for immediate deployment. We will reach the human homeworld in 12 hours. Vexcor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be the fastest military operation in Galactic Council history. The humans had been given 60 days to surrender, but intelligence reports suggested they had done nothing with that time. No evacuation efforts, no diplomatic overtures, no visible military buildup. They were either paralyzed by fear or too primitive to understand what was coming. Either way, the result would be the same. "Open a channel to all fleet commanders," Vexcor ordered. Begin final approach procedures. Maintain formation Delta 7. When we arrive in the human system, I want every species in the galaxy to see what happens when primitives threaten civilized worlds." The fleet surged forward, their faster-than-light drives creating ripples in space-time that would be visible to any sufficiently advanced sensors. But the human system appeared quiet on all frequencies. No defensive satellites, no patrol ships, no sign that they even knew the fleet was coming. Vex Corps found it almost disappointing. 12 hours later, the Coalition fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of what humans called their solar system. The star designated Sol burned before them, a modest yellow dwarf that seemed unremarkable among the trillions of stars in the galaxy. The third planet from that star was their target, Earth, a blue and green world that looked peaceful from this distance. "Launch reconnaissance drones," Vex Corps ordered. "Map all human installations, military capabilities, and population centers. Begin scanning for weapon systems." The drones deployed, spreading across the solar system to gather intelligence. Vex Corps settled back to watch the data come in, expecting to see the primitive infrastructure of a species barely beyond their own planet. What he saw instead made no sense. "Commander," the tactical officer said, confusion evident in his voice. "The inner system appears to be empty. We're detecting no military vessels, no defense platforms, no orbital weapons. The fourth planet, Mars, shows signs of recent industrial activity, but it's been abandoned. The asteroid belt has mining operations, but they're unmanned." "What about the homeworld?" "Earth's orbital space is clear, Commander. No satellites, no space stations, no defensive positions. The planet appears to be completely undefended." Vex Corps felt a spike of unease. This made no tactical sense. Even the most primitive species would attempt some form of defense, unless this was a trap. "Full spectrum scan," he ordered. "Search for cloaked vessels, hidden installations, anything that might pose a threat." The scanners worked for several minutes, probing every corner of the inner solar system with sensors that could detect a single fighter craft hiding behind a moon. They found nothing. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from Earth," the communications officer reported. "Audio only. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies." "Play it." A human voice filled the bridge, speaking in what the translation matrix identified as English, one of Earth's dominant languages. The voice was calm, almost casual. "To the Coalition fleet currently at our system's edge, this is General Marcus Webb of Earth's Unified Defense Command. You came here expecting a fight, and we're not going to disappoint you. But before we begin, I want to make something very clear. You've made several critical errors in your assessment of humanity, and I'm going to explain them to you. Consider it a courtesy, since you were kind enough to give us 60 days to prepare." Vex Corps felt his crystalline skin prickle with irritation. The audacity of this primitive, speaking as if he held any advantage. The human continued. "First, you assumed we would defend our orbital space, that we would put ships and platforms where you could see them and destroy them with your superior firepower. You thought like civilized species who fight civilized wars. We're not civilized, General Vex Corps. We never have been." The use of his name sent a shock through the bridge. How did they know who commanded this fleet? "Second, you assumed our technology deficit made us weak. You cataloged our weapons and found them primitive compared to yours. You looked at our chemical rockets and fusion warheads and laughed. But you forgot something important. Humans don't fight with the weapons we have. We fight with the weapons we can imagine." The transmission paused, and in that silence, Vex Corps' tactical displays began lighting up with warnings. "Sir," the tactical officer said urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the inner system. They were hidden, running completely cold until now. Thousands of them." "What kind of energy signatures?" "I don't know, sir. They don't match any known weapons profile." Webb's voice returned, now carrying an edge of steel. "Third, and most importantly, You made the mistake of giving us 60 days. We've been fighting wars for 7,000 years. Do you know what humans can accomplish in 60 days when their survival depends on it? Let me show you." The asteroid belt came alive. What VexCorp had dismissed as abandoned mining operations revealed their true nature. Thousands of hollowed-out asteroids, each one turned into a weapons platform, activated simultaneously. But these weren't conventional weapons. The energy readings were unlike anything in the Coalition database. "They've weaponized the asteroids," the science officer reported in disbelief. "They've installed some kind of mass driver system in each one. They're launching projectiles." "Impossible," VexCorp said. "Mass drivers are primitive weapons. Our shields will stop any kinetic projectile they can launch." But even as he said it, he saw the calculations his tactical computer was running. The asteroids weren't launching ordinary projectiles. They were launching pieces of themselves, chunks of rock and metal ranging from the size of a fist to the size of a building. And they were launching thousands of them simultaneously. "Those projectiles are moving at 0.3 light speed," the tactical officer said, his voice rising in panic. "They've used electromagnetic acceleration to near relativistic velocities. Impact in 30 seconds. Raise shields. All ships. Evasive maneuvers." The Coalition fleet began to move, but 300 ships cannot change direction quickly. The first wave of projectiles arrived like a meteor storm, except each meteor carried the kinetic energy of a nuclear weapon. The shields held against the initial impacts, but the sheer volume of projectiles overwhelmed the defensive systems. Smaller chunks got through, hammering hull armor. Larger pieces struck with enough force to crack ship hulls, and behind the first wave came a second, then a third. "Report!" VexCorp demanded. "Shields holding on most vessels, but we're taking damage. The Vexorian cruiser, Harmony, has lost shield generators on its port side. The Morphean frigate, Crystal Song, is reporting hull breaches. Commander, they've turned the entire asteroid belt into a weapons platform." Webb's voice returned, cutting through the chaos. "You see, the thing about mass drivers is that they're simple. Any species with basic physics understanding can build them. But humans had something else: 60 days and absolute desperation. We hollowed out 3,000 asteroids. We installed electromagnetic rails in each one. We aimed them at the exact coordinates where we calculated you would arrive, based on standard Coalition approach vectors we found in the data Captain Chen provided." VexCorp felt cold realization settling over him. The intelligence. The captain they had dismissed as an insignificant scout. The humans had known everything about their tactics, their technology, their approach patterns. "We didn't have shields or energy weapons or faster-than-light drives," Webb continued. "But we had rocks, and we had math, and we had something you've forgotten how to do. We improvised. We adapted. We used what we had to build something that could hurt you." The projectile storm continued for 5 minutes. When it finally ended, the Coalition fleet had lost 17 ships completely destroyed and 43 more with critical damage. Over 3,000 crew members were dead, and they hadn't even reached Earth's orbit yet. "This is an outrage," VexCorp transmitted on open channels. "You violated every rule of civilized warfare, using weapons of such indiscriminate destruction, sacrificing your own resources." "Now you're getting it," Webb interrupted. "We don't fight civilized wars because we're not civilized. We fight to win, and we'll use every resource, every advantage, every dirty trick we can imagine. You wanted to reduce us to a pre-industrial state? You wanted to teach us a lesson? Well, lesson received, and here's our response. If you want Earth, you're going to have to take it, and we're going to make you pay for every meter." VexCorp cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "Begin the advance. Launch all fighter squadrons. Target any installation that could pose a threat. Show these primitives what real military power looks like." The Coalition fleet moved forward, battered but not broken. 250 ships still capable of fighting, carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet. The human trick with the asteroids had been clever, but it was a one-time surprise. Now the humans would face the full might of the coalition. As the fleet approached Mars, proximity alarms began screaming again. "Sir, I'm detecting thousands of objects in Mars orbit," the tactical officer reported. "They appear to be satellites, but they're active and targeting our ships." "Satellites? Destroy them." The coalition fighters opened fire, and the satellites began exploding in brilliant flashes. But as they died, they released their payloads, clouds of reflective chaff, metallic fragments, and something else that made the coalition sensors scream with interference. "They've deployed radiation sources," the science officer reported. "Some kind of dirty bomb network. They're flooding the area with electromagnetic interference. Our targeting systems are compromised." Through the interference, more objects appeared. These weren't satellites. They were missiles, hundreds of them, launched from hidden positions on Mars's surface. But these missiles weren't aimed at the coalition ships. They were aimed at each other. "What are they doing?" VexCorp demanded. He got his answer seconds later. The missiles collided with each other in the middle of the coalition formation, and each collision triggered a fusion warhead. The humans had turned their own missiles into fragmentation bombs, filling space with nuclear fire and shrapnel. The coalition shields absorbed most of the damage, but the sheer chaos of it disrupted their formation. Ships collided trying to avoid the explosions. Fighter squadrons scattered. And through it all, more hidden weapons platforms activated, launching more missiles, more projectiles, more desperate attacks. "They're everywhere," the tactical officer said. "They've seeded the entire inner system with weapons. This isn't a battle, Commander. It's an ambush." VexCorp stared at his tactical displays, watching his perfectly organized fleet descend into chaos. The humans weren't fighting like any opponent he had ever faced. They weren't trying to win a direct confrontation. They were trying to make every meter of space as costly as possible, and it was working. "All ships, hold position," VexCorp ordered. "Consolidate formation. We'll proceed more cautiously." Webb's voice returned, and now there was something almost mocking in its tone. "You're wondering how we did all this in 60 days. You're wondering how a primitive species could build thousands of weapons platforms without you detecting the industrial activity. Want to know the secret?" VexCorp didn't respond, but Webb continued anyway. "We didn't build them in 60 days. We started building them 70 years ago, right after we developed nuclear weapons. We've been preparing for this war since before we knew aliens existed. Every major military on Earth had contingency plans for extraterrestrial invasion. We just had to dust them off and implement them." The cold logic of it struck VexCorp like a physical blow. The humans hadn't spent 60 days building a defense. They had spent 60 days activating and deploying a defense network that had been under construction for decades. They had been preparing to fight superior enemies before they even knew those enemies were real. What kind of species did that? What kind of paranoid, aggressive, dangerous species spent generations preparing for threats that might not exist? The answer, VexCorp realized with growing dread, was exactly the kind of species that the Galactic Council had decided was too dangerous to exist. And now that species was fighting for its survival with the accumulated military wisdom of 7,000 years of warfare and 70 years of preparation for this exact scenario. "Continue to Earth," VexCorp ordered quietly. "All ships, maximum shields. Stay alert for anything unusual." As the battered coalition fleet limped toward the blue planet ahead, VexCorp couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still waiting for them. The asteroids and Mars orbit had been preliminaries. Earth itself would be where the humans made their final stand. And after everything he had seen, VexCorp was beginning to suspect that the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake 60 days ago. They hadn't given the humans time to surrender. They had given them time to prepare. And humans, as it turned out, were very good at preparation. The coalition fleet reached Earth orbit with 231 ships remaining operational. They had lost over 60 vessels crossing the inner solar system, not from direct combat, but from 1,000 small ambushes and traps. The humans had turned their own star system into a gauntlet of improvised weapons and desperate tactics. Commander Vexcor stared at the blue planet below, feeling something he had never experienced in 3 decades of military service. Uncertainty. The planet appeared peaceful from orbit, clouds swirling across blue oceans and green continents, but he had learned that human appearances were deceiving. "Final scan," he ordered. "I want to know about every installation, every military base, every possible threat on that planet's surface." The science officer worked for several minutes before responding. "Sir, the results are contradictory. We're detecting thousands of military installations across all continents, but many of them appear to be decoys. The humans have built fake bases, false radar signatures, dummy installations. It's impossible to tell which targets are legitimate." "How many potential targets?" "Over 10,000, sir, and that's just the obvious ones. They could have hidden installations we cannot detect." Vexcor felt a headache forming behind his crystalline eyes. The humans had turned their entire planet into a shell game, making every target suspect and every attack potentially wasted effort. "Open a channel to Earth," he commanded. "Let's end this." The transmission opened, and Webb's voice came through immediately, as if he had been waiting by the communication console. "Commander Vexcor, I see you made it through our welcome mat. How many ships did you lose?" "General Webb," Vexcor said, keeping his voice level, "you've made your point. You're not as helpless as we assumed, but look at your situation objectively. We still have enough firepower to destroy your civilization. Your tricks and traps have hurt us, but they haven't stopped us. Surrender now, and we can negotiate terms that allow your species to survive." There was a pause, and then Webb laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You still don't understand, do you? You're thinking about this like a civilized species. You're calculating losses and gains, weighing costs and benefits. You think we'll surrender because continuing to fight is illogical." Webb's voice hardened. "But humans aren't logical when we're fighting for survival. We're desperate, and desperate humans are the most dangerous things in the universe." "Your desperation won't save you from orbital bombardment," Vexcor replied. "We can glass your cities from orbit. Your primitive weapons cannot reach us here." "Can't they?" As if on cue, alarms began screaming across the Coalition fleet. The tactical displays lit up with hundreds of new contacts launching from Earth's surface. "Missiles incoming!" the tactical officer shouted. "Multiple launch points across the planet. They're not standard ballistic trajectories, sir. These missiles are maneuvering." Vexcor watched the display in disbelief. The missiles climbing from Earth's atmosphere weren't following predictable paths. They were dodging, weaving, using Earth's magnetic field and gravitational effects to change course unpredictably. And there were so many of them. "Those are nuclear-tipped missiles," the science officer reported. "But they're also carrying conventional warheads, kinetic penetrators, and electromagnetic pulse devices. The humans are throwing everything they have at us. Point defense systems, engage all targets, fighter squadrons, intercept pattern beta." The Coalition ships opened fire, their energy weapons cutting through space in precise beams. They shot down the first wave of missiles easily, then the second. But the third wave had learned from the others, adapting their approach patterns to avoid the areas where previous missiles had been destroyed. "They're using swarm intelligence," the science officer said in amazement. "Each missile is communicating with the others, sharing data about our defensive patterns. They're adapting in real time." The fourth wave reached the fleet. Shields flared as nuclear warheads detonated, creating spheres of plasma that washed over Coalition hulls. The electromagnetic pulse weapons fired, disrupting sensors and communications. Kinetic penetrators punched through weakened shields, creating holes for the next wave to exploit. "Casualties?" Vexcor demanded. 14 ships destroyed, 37 with critical damage. Sir, they're launching another wave. The battle continued for 3 hours. Wave after wave of missiles climbed from Earth's surface, each one learning from those that came before. The humans were spending their entire nuclear arsenal, every weapon they had stockpiled over decades of Cold War paranoia, all of it thrown at the coalition fleet in a desperate attempt to survive. And it was working. When the missile storm finally ended, the coalition fleet had been reduced to 173 operational ships. They had lost over 40% of their original strength, and they hadn't even begun the ground invasion. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're demanding a status report." VexCorp closed his eyes for a moment, considering what to say. How could he explain this to the Council? How could he tell them that a primitive species with inferior technology had just destroyed a third of their fleet? "Tell them the situation is under control," he said finally. "We're proceeding with the ground invasion." "Sir, perhaps we should consider orbital bombardment instead. We could destroy their military capabilities from orbit without risking more ships." "And destroy the planet in the process? The Council wants humanity neutralized, not extinct. We need to demonstrate that resistance is futile. We need to break their will to fight." VexCorp pulled up the tactical display showing Earth's surface. "Prepare landing forces. Target their capital cities. Once we have control of their population centers, they'll have no choice but to surrender." The first troop transports began their descent an hour later. 50,000 coalition ground troops in powered armor, supported by armored vehicles and atmospheric fighters. They targeted 10 major cities simultaneously: New York, London, Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sao Paulo, Sydney, and Johannesburg. The resistance they encountered was immediate and overwhelming. In New York, the coalition troops landed in Central Park, expecting to secure the area and advance into the city. Instead, they found themselves in a kill box. Every building surrounding the park contained armed humans using weapons that shouldn't have been effective against powered armor, but somehow were. Armor-piercing rounds developed specifically for fighting shielded opponents. Electromagnetic weapons designed to disrupt coalition power systems. Chemical weapons that ate through crystalline armor. "They knew exactly where we would land," the ground commander reported. "They've fortified every approach route. Sir, these humans have been studying us. They know our equipment weaknesses." In London, coalition troops found the streets filled with improvised explosives. Every manhole cover was a potential bomb. Every building was a potential ambush point. The humans weren't fighting from military installations. They were fighting from their homes, their businesses, their schools. In Moscow, the humans used the weather against them. They had seeded the clouds with special chemicals that created electromagnetic interference, blinding coalition sensors. Then they attacked from below, using the city's vast metro system to move troops and supplies unseen. The pattern repeated in every city. The coalition forces had superior technology and training, but the humans had home field advantage and 7,000 years of urban warfare experience. They used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, and the kind of ruthless pragmatism that came from fighting for survival. VexCorp watched the battle reports with growing horror. His ground forces were being bled dry by an enemy that refused to fight fair. The humans didn't care about honor or military protocol. They cared about killing coalition troops by any means necessary. "Pull back the ground forces," he ordered. "Regroup and consolidate positions." "Sir, if we retreat now, we'll lose all momentum. The humans will see it as a victory." "The humans have already won their victory," VexCorp said quietly. "They've proven they can fight us. Now we need to figure out if we can actually defeat them." As the coalition forces retreated to defensible positions, Webb's voice came through on the command channel again. "You're learning, Commander. That's good. Let me explain something to you about human warfare. We've spent thousands of years fighting each other. We've developed tactics for every situation: urban combat, guerrilla warfare, asymmetric conflicts, total war. We've written manuals on how to defeat superior enemies. We've studied every battle, every defeat, every victory. War is in our DNA. You're proud of your barbarism? VexCorps demanded. Proud, no, but we're honest about what we are. You came here thinking you were punishing a dangerous species, but you made a critical error in judgment. You thought our violence made us weak, something to be suppressed and controlled. You didn't realize that our violence is what makes us survivors. Webb paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a weight that made VexCorps' crystalline skin crawl. Here's what's going to happen, Commander. You're going to take your remaining ships and leave our system. You're going to go back to the Galactic Council and tell them exactly what happened here. You're going to explain that humanity fought you to a standstill using inferior technology, improvised weapons, and sheer determination. And then you're going to recommend that the Council never comes back. And if we refuse, if we commit everything we have to destroying you, then we'll kill you all and build ships from the wreckage of your fleet. We'll reverse engineer your technology. We'll learn everything you know about faster-than-light travel and energy shields and advanced weapons. And then, Commander, we'll come visiting. We'll show the Galactic Council what happens when you threaten humanity and fail to finish the job. The threat hung in the air between them, and VexCorps realized with sickening certainty that Webb meant every word. If the Coalition destroyed itself trying to conquer Earth, humanity would use that sacrifice to bootstrap themselves into a spacefaring civilization. And a humanity with advanced technology and a grudge would be far more dangerous than a humanity confined to their home planet. You're bluffing, VexCorps said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Look at what we accomplished in 60 days, Commander. Imagine what we could do in 60 years. Imagine what we could do in 600 years, nursing a hatred for the species that tried to genocide us and failed. Is that really the legacy you want to leave the galaxy? VexCorps looked at his tactical displays, at the battered remains of his fleet, at the casualty reports still coming in from the ground teams. He thought about the thousands of crew members who had died in this operation, killed by a species that wasn't supposed to be able to fight back. He thought about his orders from the Galactic Council, about the judgment that had been passed on humanity, and he thought about what would happen if he followed those orders to their logical conclusion. I need to consult with the Council, he said finally. Take your time, Webb replied. But I'll give you some free advice. When you're talking to them, remember that they're the ones who gave us 60 days. They're the ones who underestimated us. They're the ones who turned humanity from a contained problem into an active threat. Make sure they understand that before they make another mistake. The transmission ended, leaving VexCorps alone with his thoughts and his dying fleet. 3 days later, the Coalition fleet departed Earth orbit. They left behind 5,000 dead crew members, 76 destroyed ships, and the shattered remains of their certainty in Coalition superiority. VexCorps composed his report to the Galactic Council with careful precision. He detailed every engagement, every casualty, every tactical surprise the humans had deployed. He explained how humanity had turned their technological disadvantage into an advantage by using unconventional tactics and improvised weapons. He described the ferocity of their resistance and the sophistication of their strategic thinking. And at the end of his report, he made his recommendation: leave humanity alone. The humans are dangerous, he wrote, not because they are strong, but because they are adaptable. They learn from every engagement. They improvise solutions to problems that should be impossible to solve. They fight with a desperation and creativity that no civilized species can match because they have spent their entire existence preparing for war. We attempted to neutralize this threat and failed. Further attempts will only make them stronger. If we continue this conflict, we will either destroy them completely or provide them with the motivation and opportunity to become a spacefaring civilization bent on revenge. Neither outcome serves the Council's interests. My recommendation is to quarantine Earth, but leave it intact. Monitor their development, but do not interfere. Allow them to advance at their own pace. Perhaps in time, they will mature into a species that can coexist with galactic civilization, or perhaps they will destroy themselves through their own violence. Either way, it should be their choice, not ours. We announced war on humanity, and they answered with a tactical masterpiece. They showed us that technology alone does not guarantee victory. They reminded us that the most dangerous opponent is not the strongest, but the most desperate. Let this be a lesson to the Galactic Council. Never underestimate a species fighting for survival. Ambassador Thexalon read Vexcor's report in the council chambers, his crystalline face reflecting the light from a dozen suns. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence as they absorbed the implications of what had happened. "This is unprecedented," the Morphean delegate said finally. "A primitive species defeated a coalition fleet?" "They didn't defeat us," Thexalon corrected. "They made the cost of defeating them too high to justify." "There's a difference." "What do you recommend?" asked the Delthani representative. Thexalon looked at the report again, at the casualty numbers and tactical analyses. He thought about his own role in this disaster, about his certainty that humanity needed to be neutralized. "I recommend we accept Commander Vexcor's suggestion," he said slowly. "We leave humanity alone. We monitor them from a distance, and we hope that they prove to be better neighbors than enemies." The vote was unanimous. The quarantine around Earth would remain in place, but no further military action would be taken. Humanity would be allowed to develop on their own, free from Council interference. On Earth, General Webb stood in the Pentagon's command center, watching the coalition fleet's faster-than-light signatures disappear from the edge of the solar system. Around him, military personnel from every nation on Earth were celebrating their impossible victory. But Webb wasn't celebrating. He was already thinking about the future, about the galaxy beyond Earth's sky, about the civilizations that had judged humanity and found them wanting. "Sir," an aide approached him. "Message from the President. She wants to know if we won." Webb considered the question carefully. They had survived. They had driven off a superior enemy, but they had also revealed themselves to a galaxy that feared them. They had proven every negative assumption the Council had made about human violence and aggression. "Tell the President we bought ourselves time," Webb said finally. "Whether we won or lost depends on what we do with it." He pulled up the technical data Captain Chen had provided. The information about faster-than-light drives and energy shields and advanced weapons. Humanity now had a blueprint for building a spacefaring civilization. The question was whether they would use that knowledge to become the peaceful neighbors the Council hoped for, or the vengeful threat they feared. Sarah Chen stood beside him looking at the same data. "What happens now?" she asked. Webb smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had terrified the Coalition ground commanders. "Now we do what humans do best. We learn, we adapt, we prepare. The galaxy tried to teach us a lesson about our place in the universe. Instead, we taught them a lesson about underestimating humanity." He pulled up a star chart showing the nearest inhabited systems, the Coalition territories, and the vast, unexplored regions beyond. "They gave us 60 days to prepare for their invasion. We used that time to survive. Now they've given us all the time in the world to prepare for whatever comes next, and when we finally reach the stars, we'll do it on our terms." Sarah looked at the star chart, at the thousands of systems waiting to be explored. "Do you think they'll leave us alone?" "I think they'll try," Webb replied. "But eventually, humanity will reach those stars, and when we do, the galaxy is going to learn something important. You don't threaten humans and expect them to forget. You don't try to destroy us and expect us to forgive. We're not wired that way." He closed the star chart and turned to face the command center. where representatives from every nation were working together for the first time in human history, united by the common threat they had faced and overcome. The aliens announced war, Webb said quietly. We answered with a tactical masterpiece. Now let's make sure that when we announce our presence to the galaxy, we do it with something even more impressive, a humanity that learned from this war and became stronger because of it. The command center erupted in cheers, but Webb remained focused on the work ahead. The war was over, but humanity's journey into the stars was just beginning. And thanks to 60 days of desperate preparation and 7,000 years of accumulated warfare experience, humanity would make that journey as survivors, as fighters, and as a species that had earned its place in the galaxy the hard way. The Galactic Council had wanted to eliminate the human threat. Instead, they had forged humanity into something more dangerous than they could have imagined. A unified species with a common purpose, advanced knowledge, and the memory of how close they had come to extinction. In trying to prevent humanity from reaching the stars, the Council had given them every reason to get there faster. And somewhere in the depths of space, on ships limping back to their home worlds, Coalition crew members told stories about the battle for Earth. They spoke in hushed voices about the ferocity of human resistance, about the creativity of their tactics, about the terrifying determination of a species fighting for survival. Those stories would spread throughout the galaxy, carried by survivors who had learned a lesson their commanders never intended to teach: that the most dangerous species in the universe is not the strongest or the most advanced, but the one with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Humanity had been judged and sentenced by the Galactic Council. But in the crucible of that judgment, they had forged themselves into something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that could turn disadvantage into advantage, weakness into strength, and certain defeat into improbable victory. The aliens had announced war. Humanity had answered with a tactical masterpiece, and the galaxy would never be the same.